Today I want to cover the case about Reed Jeppson. He was 15 years old when he disappeared. He lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, and this happened on October 11th, 1964. He had two German short-haired pointer dogs. He was teaching them to do bird hunting. He went outside to feed them and possibly to take them on a walk when Jeppson and his two dogs were never seen again. They never came home again. It's really tragic because you can see he looks like your typical 1960s teenager. He has braces. He has his whole future ahead of him. And yet, for over 45 years, his family has no idea what happened to Reed Jeppson. One of the last people to see him was his sister, Suzanne Jeppson Tate. The family had returned from home that Sunday from church services. It was supposed to be some sort of meeting that they had attended there at church. His family was Mormon. And then he got home, he went upstairs and changed his clothes and started opening up cans of dog food. His sister said, "What are you going to do?" And he said he was going to feed the dogs. So he had his two German short hair pointers in a kennel in the backyard. One was an adult dog and the other was a puppy. He said, "I'll be back." And she reminded him that they were going to eat supper. That's what they called lunch back then. And none of his family ever saw him again. But Suzanne says the pain and anguish will never go away. Reed was an Eagle Scout, and he was keeping the two dogs as a way to earn his badge for taking care of animals. So this is what a German short-haired pointer looks like. Of course, they vary in coloration, but these dogs are known to be dogs that kind of just sprint and run away and do their own thing when they're focused on seeing an animal that they want to catch. Reed was described by his family as very strong, athletic. He was familiar with the outdoors, and he was a happy teenager. He was last seen wearing a pair of blue Levi jeans, a white cotton shirt, gym shoes, and a reversible parka. At that time, Reed earned extra money by delivering the newspaper around the neighborhood. Him and his brother partnered up and they would deliver newspapers every morning. So the family says it is possible that Reed had about $40 on him at the time that he disappeared. But as usual, the police believed that he had run away to go and on an adventure or to go and meet some girl in Missouri that he was interested in. However, none of this really adds up, and his family does not believe he ran away. They do believe he was abducted. The police did make an effort to look for Reed Jeppson, and everybody went searching that evening for him. Now, they did question his friends, and they tried tracking down that lead that he went to Kansas City. According to the 1964 police report, Jeppson had worked at a ranch in Wyoming and had grown fond of a girl from Missouri. But again, they didn't find Jeppson anywhere in Missouri. And so 10 days passed and there were still no leads. However, there were reports of people seeing the dogs, but this tip was never investigated. And I really do wish we had a time machine so somebody could go back and tell the police, "Come on, look into this." Then there was another tip that came in where somebody said they had seen Jeppson walking with the two dogs. This was around 1:30 p.m. and he was spotted walking with the two dogs behind the old St. Mary's of the Wasatch building in Salt Lake City. This was a Catholic school building that he was last seen walking behind. Now remember, Jeppson had gone outside to feed his dogs. He never indicated he was going to walk the dogs. So you wonder if he just figured, oh, I have the time to do this to get them some exercise, or if one of the dogs or both of the dogs escaped and he was trying to catch them. I'm not really sure. There's no description as to whether he was calmly walking or running after the dogs. So the school would have been almost dead east of the Jeppson home, 1.2 to 1.5 miles away. And it was south of Immigration Canyon, which is a huge canyon. I looked at the map. The building was only standing there from 1926 to 1972, and then the school was demolished, so it no longer stands there today. So, in the interview his brother John Jeppson did online, and I'll put the YouTube link in the description, he said that they had gone to a priesthood meeting, which was before lunch, and then after lunch, which, back then they called supper, they were going to go to Sunday school, and then around 4 p.m. they had sacrament. It would be very out of character for Reed to miss these meetings at church and these church services because his father and his mother were extremely devout Mormons, and they believed in never missing anything unless you were deathly ill. Reed had 11 brothers and sisters, and his family started searching for him that evening after he went missing. He had a brother named Edward who was a pilot, and he even searched from the air. He had a sister who was at BYU. Her name was Sally, and she came home to help search. So the family ranged from Sister Patricia, who was the eldest at 29, who was married with kids of her own, all the way to baby Keith, who was only 7 when Reed disappeared. During the next few days, the family not only actively searched, they also posted flyers everywhere. Keith, who again was 7 when his brother disappeared, said, "I remember going through the mountains and lots of people searching everywhere and every cave." Because there were caves in those mountains, there were also abandoned mine shafts, so there were some dangers to a young boy. Reed's sister, Suzanne Tate, states that the reason the family filed a police report that evening and started searching for Reed was because, quote, "we knew something had to have happened to him because this was not Reed," end quote. According to the newspaper accounts from 1964, there were police in 3 states that were notified about the Eagle Scout's disappearance because there was a possibility they believed that he had gone to his family ranch in Wyoming, or maybe he went to visit that girl in Missouri. But the family also started making phone calls to friends, and they checked Reed's bank account. He had $60 in savings from his newspaper route, and some newspaper accounts vary. They say he may have had $40 cash on him, but he did leave all his belongings in his room. I read various accounts that the police received a tip. In some of the newspaper accounts, they say it was a friend, inferring that it was a friend of Reed's from school or maybe from the sports he participated in. But another one specifically said a Jeppson family friend, and it never named the person or stated if they were an adult or not. But they told police that they had seen him walking behind that school of St. Mary's on Wasatch Drive towards Immigration Canyon at 1:30 p.m. on the day he went missing. So I tried to find old maps from this time period. As you can see, here is one of Salt Lake City, and on the right you see where it says to Immigration Canyon. Notice also there was Fort Douglas Military Reservation nearby. I even read some accounts that there was a firing range on that military reservation. However, they made it out like it was inactive during the time because at first I started to surmise maybe Reed and or his dogs got accidentally shot and somebody covered it up. But that ended up not being something that could be the case. However, I did read online on Web Sleuths, somebody else theorized that possibly he found an old artillery shell that exploded, and that is a possibility. So I like this older map because you can see it circled where St. Mary of Wasatch School is. However, I noticed that Wasatch, the street, is going north-south, not west east, so I'm not sure how he could have been behind the school when the eyewitness allegedly spotted him. Here is another map with another view. This one seems a little bit like it has some topo info on it because you can see like the wavy lines on the canyon. But you can see where the school is and how close it is to the foothills of an area called Spring Canyon, which was a part of Immigration Canyon. I should note that both these areas were also well known to be areas where there were rattlesnakes, so keep that in mind. And you can also see when you look to the left the Bonneville Golf Course, which was a very popular area to hang out. This map is a little harder to read. I know you will have some trouble seeing it, but it is a vintage map from that time period that I was able to find on eBay. And so you can see on the right side the canyon, the mountains, and then over just exactly left to that is where the St. Mary's School is. So you can see how close it was to that habitat. But right next to where St. Mary's School is, there is also Hogle Zoo, which his brother John Jeppson didn't actually mention that the tipster had seen, or the family friend had seen him at St. Mary of Wasatch School, but he says the sighting was near Hogle Zoo. It's not very far, but this would make Reed further north into more rugged terrain. This area is now known as This is the Place Heritage Park, but back then it was Pioneer Monument State Park, and it had lots of walking trails. It was purchased in 1957 but had previously been used as the artillery range for Fort Douglas. Something else to take note of is that Reed was out there walking over the weekend when deer hunting season had started. So it's possible that Reed or the dogs may have been accidentally shot by a hunter or hunters. I got on Google Maps, and keep in mind this is a recent mapping of the area that he was headed towards. And I put in his house address, which was available in like all the newspapers at that time. That was something very common that they did, was list addresses. And I put from there walking towards Immigration Canyon to see how long that walk would have been, and it says it's about a 10-minute walk by foot. Here is another view that somebody on Web Sleuths put up to share. And you can see where Wasatch Drive is, and then it becomes Crestview Drive. Now that's more north, and that would be in the area where the school was. But you can see to your left where the Hogle Zoo is. There's also a creek near there called Immigration Creek. There was just a lot of areas where he could have been and where he could have went missing. While Reed and his family identified as Mormons, there is also the possibility that he could have had a run-in with somebody at the St. Mary of Wasatch School. It was a Catholic school, and I went to their Facebook page, and it stated that it was administered by the Sisters of the Holy Cross, was founded at St. Mary's Academy in Salt Lake City in 1926, and it was flourishing as a college and later as a high school until it closed down in 1970. It is very rare to find any information online about the school and to find any kind of photographs. I never was able to find any of the interior of the building, but I was able to find several on their Facebook page, which is public, and I am sharing them here so you can get an idea of what the school and the surrounding area looked like. There were several newspaper articles about Reed Jeppson and his disappearance. His family was very prominent in the area. His father was a doctor. His name was Edward Jeppson, and his mother was a homemaker, but they were very involved in their local Mormon church. Now, remember, Reed wore braces on his top set of teeth and his bottom row of teeth, and so it would not be ideal for him to run away because at some point, not only do braces need to be removed, they always need maintenance. They need tightening, loosening, and such. So most people would probably wait until the braces were taken off before making a plan to escape. At the time he went missing, Reed was described as 5 foot 6 inches, 140 pounds. He was athletic. He was on the football team and he had recently scored his first touchdown. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was a sophomore at East High School. Local law enforcement was quoted as saying that Reed, quote, liked to climb in the foothills, end quote. They also reached out to local hunters to help in the search for the missing teenager, as you can see from this article here. And remember, St. Mary's is right at the base of the foothills. Reed's house was south and west of the Bonneville Golf Course, and the diagonal street is Foothills Boulevard, which is a third of a mile from Reed's old house. There was also another local school nearby known as Indian Hills School, and it was in the general vicinity of Wasatch Drive. Could the witness, the family friend, have confused those two schools, or where they say they saw Reed? We'll never know because all of that information has been lost to time. In 2010, the police reopened the case. In some of the 2010 to more recent articles, his older sister, Suzanne Tate, says that she knows that somebody knows what happened to her brother, and she implored whoever that is to just tell us. Whoever hurt my brother, and I know he was abducted, had to be somebody 18 years or older, she said. That person is probably around my age today, and we're not looking at a whole lot of years left. We want this person to give us some resolve and closure if they are still alive. We want them to have their heart softened and their heart touched, and to let us know where his remains are. His sister, Suzanne Tate, has her own theory about what happened to her brother Reed. She says, I had told my mother I believe a pedophile got a hold of him. It had to have been a pedophile. In a police report, the police did question a known pedophile who lived nearby. Here is what we know from the questioning. Here's an excerpt. Pedophile. I'll tell you one thing. I would appreciate you finding out who killed him. Police. How do you know Reed was killed instead of running away? Most of the gossip is that Reed was a runaway. Pedophile. Well, I know that this length of time they're never going to find out. In the police report, police claim the man was somewhat laughing as he said that, but in the end they could never find any evidence to tie him to the crime. He was not known to be violent, and so the Salt Lake City police ruled him out. The police had no leads. There were reports of people seeing the dogs, but nobody actually found them. And Suzanne Tate goes on to say, when you have someone missing, the victim, the missing person isn't the only victim. The whole family starts to suffer. First, there's worrying, then that turns into frustration, and after years and years, despair sets in. Anytime I hear there are remains found, I'm on the phone, Tate said. I know he wants to be found. It just takes time. 2 years later, after they reopened the case in 2010, in 2012, the Salt Lake City Tribune and ABC4.com had a report saying that the Salt Lake City police were digging in a gully about a half a block from the Jeppson home. So the Salt Lake City police received information that they had obtained, and they started digging in the gully, which was a half a block from the Jeppson home. They searched an East Side gully with shovels and a backhoe Saturday while family members anxiously waited nearby to see if they would find any answers. The gully was located near 1900 East and 1400 South. The police had cordoned it off to search for the remains of Reed Jeppson. But unfortunately for Reed's family, they were unable to locate his remains. The Salt Lake City police detective Josh Ashdown said that the police had received new information, but he couldn't go into specifics about the tip, which is understandable. But he did say it was enough of a tip that it was worth coming out here with some cadaver dogs and digging. Now, the searchers did focus on a particular area of the gully, which is near Clayton Middle School, after cadaver dogs showed some interest in the area. It was known to the Jeppson family that Reed and his dogs would often play there in the gully. And the police decided to dig 8 feet down, but when they did, the cadaver dogs stopped indicating that there was anything to dig for, so the police gave up. Somebody on Web Sleuths wrote, I wonder if the entire ravine gully behind Clayton Middle School was ever searched. I know they dug in a specific area there in 2012, but I believe the other searches focused on the area around St. Mary's and Immigration Canyon. The ravine behind Clayton is only a half a block west of the Jeppson house, whereas St. Mary's was probably a half a mile to the east. Immigration Creek runs through this gully area. And I wonder if Reed ever took his dogs down there, is something that they speculate, which we again know that his family said Reed and his dogs would play in that gully. This makes me curious why the police did not use ground penetrating radar in 2012. And I looked to see when ground penetrating radar was developed, and it was developed in the 1930s to measure the thickness of glaciers. But it made advances in the 60s and 70s and finally became affordable for law enforcement in the mid 1980s. So I'm just curious why they didn't pursue this avenue or see if they could rent or borrow one from another police department if they didn't have one of their own. But I kind of assume Salt Lake City Police Department is like rather large, so I don't know why they would. Reed was wearing a reversible parka and he had a t-shirt on and his Levi jeans the day he went missing. So I went to one of those weather apps to see what the temperature was like on Sunday, October 11th, 1964 in Salt Lake City. He went missing around 12:30 and the family started searching that evening. As you can see, the weather was cool, but it was not cold until that evening. After 6 p.m., it would have started to get cold. When police reinvestigated the case, they shared this enhanced image of an adult Reed Jeppson so that it would help with tips. However, if Reed was alive today, as of the making of my YouTube video, he would be 74 years old. I did read some information online about the tip that had brought police to dig in that gully area that was near the Jeppson home. Someone had found animal bones. Thinking it may be dog bones, police searched for Jeppson in the area. The man who found the bones destroyed them. I have no idea why, but took pictures and gave them to police. He said it looked like two dogs, a large one and a small one. We believe that these were Reed's two dogs, his sister Suzanne said. But police found no evidence of Jeppson buried in the gully. Months later, the FBI analyzed the picture of the found bones and concluded it was an animal, but ruled they were those of a dog, which again, we kind of already knew. So, what could have caused his disappearance? Let's look at some theories of what could have happened to Reed Jeppson. Maybe Reed ran away. To me, this is the least likely theory, but who knows? It could have happened. Maybe he didn't care about having the braces on. Maybe he was upset with somebody in his family. Maybe he had a secret he was trying to hide. Maybe he struggled with his sexuality. So maybe he left because he feared judgment from the Mormon community. Maybe Reed and his dogs disappeared in the mountains. Maybe they went farther than anybody had thought that day. It would have been very easy to slip and get hurt, or even worse, stuck in a crevice in the mountains. Or he could have met with foul play. There could have been hunters there that day hunting deer, and he could have been accidentally hurt in a hunting accident. Or the dogs could have been shot, and then the person also shot Reed to cover it up. Who knows? Somebody could have wanted to steal the dogs. Maybe Reed stumbled onto something he Maybe Reed stumbled across some illegal activity like drug traffickers or crime taking place or rape or murder. Maybe as Reed was walking his dogs, somebody accidentally hit the dogs or Reed with their car and decided to cover it up. Or maybe it was an accidental death, a prank gone wrong for maybe his friends or somebody from the football team or the whole football team, and it led to an accident which ended up being a fatality. Landslides and avalanches are also a possibility. There are large herds of deer that can cause that to happen, according to this article here from the Utah Avalanche Center. Those type of dogs are very high strung. They are flight natured dogs, and they are runners who are easily spooked. Or maybe they entered a cave that day, met with bad air or poisonous air caused by high carbon dioxide levels. It can even come from water in a cave. I didn't even know that. From microorganisms or depletion of oxygen by bats, plants, or animals, or volcanic eruptions. Headache is the first sign, followed by extreme drowsiness. I was curious what kind of wild animals you can find in this area of Utah. There are deer, bighorn sheep, elk, rabbits, birds, bats, foxes, and there are 3 kinds of wild cats. I also noticed that there are coyotes and wolves as well. And don't forget those pesky rattlesnakes. It is possible that one or both of his animals got injured. Maybe it was in the process of being attacked and Reed tried to defend it. Or maybe Reed trusted the wrong person. It's possible a stranger or somebody he knew, maybe from school, maybe somebody from the community, maybe somebody from the Mormon church, offered to give him a ride but didn't take him home. Maybe Reed had the misfortune of meeting somebody on his walk near St. Mary's School. The Wasatch Cache National Forest has the most rewarding hunting areas for deer, elk, and moose. It is possible, like I have mentioned before, that Reed was accidentally shot or wounded or his dogs during this time. The tragedy continued for the Jeppson family as Dr. Edward Jeppson committed suicide a year after Reed vanished. Reed's brother, John Jeppson, says it was because he couldn't explain the mystery of Reed's disappearance, and so his father had lost his faith. I think Reed's disappearance just compounded some of the tragedy the parents had experienced earlier, as they had lost a son named Philip in 1940 who only lived one day after birth before dying of persistent thymus. They also had a daughter named Helen who was aged 5 months when she passed away at the end of 1951. Her tiny body was found in her bed, deceased. What I thought was most tragic about Dr. Jeppson's obituary is it listed surviving members in the family, and Reed was one of them. Now I would like to take a moment to honor Reed's memory and to pray that the family gets some sort of closure, that someday they get some answers. Thank you for letting me share this case with you. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Have a great day.